Hey everybody, it is Dak here from the Ed Boys, and welcome to my Nightmare guide. The Nightmare of Ashihama is a very high-level boss with some extremely expensive drops. The Nightmare is often fought in groups of 5, though it is possible to solo, and overall it's very grindable for those big drops, including the cool-ass Nightmare pet. This is my full guide for the Nightmare, so it is going to be a long video. I do plan on releasing a quick guide that'll just skim the information here for those who only want a quick rundown before going in rather than all of the little details. That will be linked in the description and should be released the day after this video. But as usual, this guide is just like how I grind out Nightmare kills. Feel free to add any more tips for Nightmare life that you might have in the comments section below, as it could help any of us out. So in this video, I'm going to go over the requirements and recommendations for fighting the Nightmare. Then we'll discuss what gear options you have and what to bring in your inventory. Next, we'll talk about how to get to the Nightmare, which is a bit of a trek. Afterwards, we'll go over the mechanics of the fight, how to kill the Nightmare, and then have a full example kill. Finally, we'll go over the best part of the bossing life, the loot. First of all, the requirements and recommendations. It's mostly recommendations, as the only full requirement is completing the Priest in Peril quest to get into the swamp area. As for your stats, I wouldn't go for this with under 80 in your attack, strength, and defense, and then 80 plus in your magic level 2. A lot of Nightmare's big hits are avoidable, so you can get a kill with a team with low stats, but she has a lot of health, so bare minimum kills are going to be very slow. I suggest 90 plus in all of these stats if you really are trying to grind out a lot of kills. The Draken's Medallion provides some very solid transportation for starting your Nightmare grind, so I highly suggest completing the Taste of Hope quest too. Any other recommendations that I have are really gear and inventory related, so we're going to move on to those sections. The best gear for killing the Nightmare is very expensive. This is an endgame boss after all, so it makes sense that high-level gear is going to be really good here. But you don't have to have the maximum setup just to get some Nightmare kills. I'm going to be going over each gear slot to break down the gear that you can bring, ranging from the best, most expensive stuff to the cheapest but still viable options. I did bring up magic earlier, where you're going to be talking about your magic gear in the inventory section of the guide. First, the helmet slot. The Inquisitor's Great Helm, along with other Inquisitor's pieces, has a nice crush bonus on it. It's less strength than the Native's Not Face Guard or the Torva full helm, but the crush bonus is big since the Nightmare is weak to crush anyways, so you want that bonus. The Torva full helm is still very expensive. Being the second best option and costing more than the best option, you're not going to see a lot of Torva full helms here. The Helm of Native's Knot is still a pretty solid helm for being so cheap, and after that you could go like Dwarven Helmet, which has a good crush bonus, but it's not that great of a helm overall. Next, the cape slot. An Infernal Cape is the best melee cape in the game, but the Fire Cape is still a fine option if you haven't made your way through the Inferno. The Mist Cape actually tends to be better than your Fire Cape here. Again, she is weak to crush, so solid crush bonuses do go a long way here. The Fire Cape is still very solid DPS, and if you're rocking the Inquisitor's Mace as your weapon, I would actually use the Fire Cape over the Mist Cape. After that, the Trimmed Skill Cape would be some good defense and prayer bonus, or at least an Obsidian Cape would give you a little defense. Now in the next slot, as usual, the Amulet of Torture is the best melee option here, but the Blood Fury is an extremely close second. It costs more money to use the Blood Fury, and the Torture has slightly better offensive stats, but with the healing mechanic on the Blood Fury, it really is awesome. When you're doing melee damage, it gives you a 20% chance to heal 30% of the damage that you did, so if you hit a 50, there's a 20% chance you'll also heal for 15 health. When you pray correctly against the Nightmare, she still does a little bit of damage, chipping away at your health, and the Blood Fury makes up for this chip damage, making it super convenient for this fight. A regular Fury is your third best option here, and then an Amulet of Glory is bare minimum, though I guess Strength Ammi has plus 10 strength on it, it's not that bad. The only option for your ammo slot is a Blessing to give you a little bit of prayer bonus. Rada's Blessing is a reward from your Korend and Kabos diaries. The Elite diaries give you the Rada's Blessing 4, which has a plus 2 prayer bonus on it, and then any other blessing is just going to be a plus 1 prayer bonus. So your choice of weapon is always very important for a bossing grind. Using the Scythe of Vitur on Crush, make sure you're using it on Crush. With full Inquisitor's armor, that's going to do the most damage, but the Scythe is very expensive to use. For this reason, the Inquisitor's Mace is still a fantastic option. Still a very expensive weapon, but you don't have to charge it, so you're not spending as much money per kill. And the Mace is a great crush weapon. It won't quite keep up with the Scythe, but it is a close second. The Abyssal Bludgeon is a good crush weapon, and it costs a lot less than either of those better options, so the Bludgeon is a sweet option for a budget setup. The Zamihasta is a little cheaper than the Bludgeon, and still does some solid damage on crush. Going further down the list of usable crush weapons, you're starting to not bring that much damage to the table, but as with any part of this guide, if you still have any questions about weapon choice, just let me know in the comments section below, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Some of the weapon options are two-handed, but if you're using the Inquisitor's Mace or the Zamihasta, you could use a shield too. The Avernic Defender is going to be your best choice, followed by that Dragon Defender if you haven't invested in the Avernic yet. If you haven't done your Defender grind, the DFS, Dragonfire Shield, has a plus 7 strength bonus, and then the Takket Zil, or in other words, the Obsidian Shield, has a plus 5 strength bonus. For your chest and legs, Inquisitors is still going to be your best option for crush add-ons. Torva is best in slot melee in most areas since it has a filthy strength bonus, but it's very expensive, so we have the same situation here as the helm slot. It's your second best option, but being the most expensive one, you're not going to see a lot of Torva here. If you already own Torva and you don't also own Inquisitors, you don't really have to sell your Torva off to do this boss, though. You still could just wear your Torva. It's pretty good. Next up would be the Bandos Chestplate and the Bandos Tassets, a classic for melee gains. And then we got the Fighter Torso that you could combo with the Obsidian Legs for a little bit of strength bonus. It's also noting the Fighter Torso has the same strength as the Bandos Chestplate, so if you are not the tank, you might want to wear the Fighter Torso instead. In your ring slot, the Berserker Ring is always the way to go. Make sure you imbue it, of course. The Brimstone Ring is your next best option, and it is better than the unimbued Berserker Ring. I don't know what's stopping you from imbuing that ring, though. The Berserker Ring happens to be pretty cheap right now, so it's easier to obtain than that Brimstone Ring. The Tyrannical Ring's slightly cheaper. It has a nice crush bonus on it, but go with that Berserker Ring. For your feet, we have the Primordial Boots for best in slot. They're a lot more expensive than Dragon Boots and only a little bit better, so this can be one of your last upgrades. Also, the Guardian Boots are not that bad, especially for tanking, as she does target the person with the biggest defense roll. So your tank could easily go for Guardian Boots to help get their defense high enough. I will be talking more about the tank mechanics in the mechanics section of this guide. Finally, for your glove slot, the Ferocious Gloves are the best thing for doing a lot of damage with melee. The Barrels Gloves are a solid second best option, plus they have good defense on them, so again, they're good for the tank to wear. If you don't have any Barrels Gloves, you would work your way down the Recipe for Disaster list of gloves to like Dragon, Rune, all the way down until Myth, which is just as good as a combat bracelet, and that's not a really solid option. If you have any questions about any of your melee gear choices, be sure to let me know in the comments section below, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Now we're moving on to the inventory. First of all, we're going to talk about your magic gear. You have to use magic against the totems in the corners. You don't have to. They have crap defense, but they do take double damage from magic, so magic is the best option. The only mage gear that matters is a good mage weapon, and then anything that adds magic damage. Something like Mystics or Arams is useless here. It only adds magic accuracy, which will not matter. There's really not any second best in slot magic things that boost damage, so like it's very easy to decide what to bring for magic here. There are a few different weapon choices though. First of all, the Harmonized Staff is still very beastly here. I say still beastly as if it's going to get worse. That is not the case. Rather, when Raids 3 is being added, we are getting a couple of upgrades that won't bode well for this staff. It's going to make everything else a little bit better. First of all, the Shadow of Tumekin. It's going to be a two-handed mage staff that can hit super hard if you combine it with some good magic damage boosting gear. I'm not 100% sure where it'll land in DPS on the pillars, but it's going to be really able to crank here, so it might replace the Harmonized Staff spot here. And then even if it doesn't, we're getting a new magic shield that is going to give magic damage boost. The only reason the Harmonized Staff is good here is because you have to pair it with the Tome of Fire and use the Fire Surge spell, but if you have to use the Tome of Fire, then you're not going to be able to use the new magic shield. So each of the other staff options that are one-handed are going to get better, while the Harmonized Staff is going to stay where it currently is. That being said, I do use the Sanguinesti Staff because it is way cheaper initially, though it does use a lot of blood runes. It's super nice to get that healing effect from the Sanguinesti Staff. The Trident of the Swamp is still a great staff here too, and not as expensive. You could even survive with the Trident of the Seas, but you're really getting kind of low DPS for your team at that point. The Occult Necklace is the best mage add-on for damage. It gives a 10% boost and only costs anywhere from 500k to 1 mil. It's 700k when I'm making this video, but the price can be fickle. Even if it was like 5 mil, it's worth it though. It's really good. The Mage Arena 2 Cape is a great add-on for damage because you don't actually have to buy it. You just need to do Mage Arena 2, which is not that bad to grind out. The Tormented Bracelet has a nice plus 5% boost, which is still really good, but a little bit more expensive than an Occult Necklace. And then finally we have the Ancestral Robes. Each piece of these robes gives a plus 2 damage bonus for magic, so they're the least helpful of the tradable options, but it's still a nice boost if you have them. For any of these mage add-ons, you either have them or you don't. There's no other mage replacements that actually give damage boosts. Just bring any of these. Whichever ones you don't have, just bring food and potions instead. I will mention again that we're getting that really good mage shield with Raids 3, so if you're watching this video and you already have that new shield, match it with your Sanguinesti or your Trident. The Imbued Heart temporarily increases your magic level. This does not affect the max hit of every attack, so you do not need it if you're using the Harmonized Nightmare Staff. It will increase your max hit from the Sanguinesti and the Trident, and I believe that Shadow of Tumekin that is coming out, it will also increase the max hit. What is in the rune pouch does depend on which staff you're using. If you have the Harmonized Nightmare Staff, then you should use Fire, Air, and Wrath runes so that you have Fire Surge. You do need to be on the normal spellbook for that. Otherwise, it suggests being on the core end spellbook and using Thralls, as they add some solid DPS during the fight. It is suggested to use the Greater Ghost Thralls over the Skeleton or Zombies, as the Ghost's magic damage does deal double damage against the totems. If you're bringing Thralls, you do have to bring the Book of the Dead. Do not forget that. There are a few options for your special attack weapons. With a team of players, you want a couple of them to have Dragon Warhammers and then use one spec at the beginning of each melee phase. You do not need 5 Dragon Warhammers though, so a couple of you could bring Saradomin Godswords, like the tank, and that'll help heal up a little bit. It is best to use the Saradomin Godsword spec on the Sleepwalkers, which happen at the end of phase 1 and 2, and we'll talk about that more during the mechanics section of the guide. The Bandos Godsword is for draining defense, similar to the Dragon Warhammer, so if you don't have any hammers, but some of you have Bandos Godswords to use, you should bring that to help speed the fight up. The Dragon Claws are a nice bonus for DPS, but the main reason that I would ever use the D Claws is to kill a parasite really quickly. With a group of 4 to 5 players, you can all attack the parasites together. It's not that big of a deal, but if you're trying to solo the Nightmare, Claws on the parasite is a must. Divine Super Combat Potion clearly just boosts your melee stats. At lower levels, you're going to be taking more sips of Ceradomin Brew. Anytime you sip a brew and it drops your combat stats, you can sip a normal Super Combat Potion to boost your stats back up. That brew does not get rid of the Divine Super Combat effect where your stats stay at a high level. They'll still stay at that high level until the timer runs out. You just had to boost them back up, which clearly is not ideal, but that is an option when needed. And we'll talk more about brews when we get to food. You'll want to use Sanfu Serums here. Technically, you can use the Relisum's Balm if you have no Sanfus, but Sanfu Serums also heal your prayer points, so it's good for longer trips. When you get impregnated with the parasite, you have to sip the Sanfu or the Relisum's Balm, so just bring them. The super restores are needed if you're using any Ceradomin brews, but you also need prayer recovery, so that's what I've got them for. The super restores, they do restore 1 more prayer point per sip than a prayer potion does, but otherwise you could just bring prayer pots. So I bring a combination of anglers and brews. Preferably you just survive the fight well enough that you only need a couple of anglers, and if you're using a Blood Fury or the Sanguinesti, you barely need to heal that much at all. I bring the brews for the emergency combo food to heal up. It's kind of like using a Carambuan, but you get more health out of a brew per inventory slot. Earlier on, while learning the boss, it's worth only going for Ceradomin brews and maybe just 1 or 2 food for the combo eat. You'll take a lot of damage as you're messing things up, but once you get the hang of the boss, it's not that bad of a fight. There's just a lot of different attacks, so you're bound to mess a couple of them up early on and just need some more brews. Overall, your ratio of potions and stuff like that is going to change as you get better at the fight. Early on, you need more food, and as you take less damage, you can bring more super combats and prayer restore stuff if you're taking longer trips. If you have any questions about the inventory, be sure to let me know in the comments section below. Traveling to the Nightmare is like the worst part about her, but there's only a couple options, so we'll be brief. If you've completed the Taste of Hope quest, then you have the Drake's Medallion. More of these can be obtained from the basement of Old Man Rawl's home, just outside of the Theater of Blood, which you can teleport to the Theater of Blood with the Drake's Medallion, so you can use the TOB bank for setting up for Nightmare, and then just run all the way north to the Town of Sleep, and then all the way down here into the Sisterhood Sanctuary, and finally, you get to the Nightmare. You can upgrade your Draken's Medallion to teleport you past the majority of that run, but that requires the Sleepy Tablet drop from the Phosani's Nightmare, which is a 1 in 100 drop rate, and that is a solo-only boss. It's like Challenge Mode Nightmare. If you're just running from the bank, you do not have to bring the medallion with you, unless you have no other bank teleport option to get back from the Nightmare, but if you're using the Rada's Blessing 4 in your Blessing slot, you then have unlimited teleports to the top of Mount Kalrulm, which is not a bad bank teleport. If you don't have the Draken's Medallion, you should use the Ectofield, which is a reward from the Ghosts Ahoy quest. You can run north of the Ectofunctus and have Andris take you a little bit into the run for 10k. You don't like cut off any of the run here. In fact, this is a little bit slower. You could also pay 1 mil one time for like a permanent payment, which is not the worst investment if you're trying to do a lot of this, but also just getting that Dragon's Medallion could save you some cash here. If you don't have the Ectofield, you could use the Fairy Ring ALQ and then run to Andris from there, but now the run's just getting ridiculous. Alright, let's go over the mechanics of the fight. I'll first just go through how to kill her, and then each of her attacks and how to avoid them, and then we'll do the full example kill. She has a lot of different attacks, which you can really break them down a lot, and that's what I'm going to be doing here. In my quick Nightmare guide, I'll go over these mechanics and how to fight it with a lot less detail, so if you're just looking for a quick rundown, that guide is linked in the description. So the fight has 3 phases, and each phase consists of 2 parts, the same exact parts. You first melee her shield, just attacking her, preferably with a very good crush weapon, and then when the shield goes down, you have to attack the totems in the corner of the room to charge them up. The totems do take 2 times damage from magic, so that is why you brought magic with you. After the totems are fully charged, she will spawn some sleepwalkers at the totem. 1 sleepwalker will be spawned for each player in the room, a maximum of 8 sleepwalkers though. These need to be killed before they make their way to the Nightmare, or else everyone in the room takes a lot of damage. The more sleepwalkers that make it to her, the more damage that the team takes. It is very easy to kill them. You're guaranteed to kill it as long as your max hit is at least a 10. You always hit that 10 damage. This is a good time to use the Ceradomin Godsword spec, as it will still heal you for all the damage that you rolled. So you only see a 10, but you might have actually rolled like a 50 and you'll heal up a lot more. Before the fight starts, just having each teammate choose a totem that they will cover, and then maybe a floater if you have an odd number, is very helpful to make sure that you're all organized to get those sleepwalkers killed. One person can KO multiple sleepwalkers though, so once yours is dead, it's not a bad idea to just target another just in case. 2 people could mess up and a team of 5 could still get through all of the sleepwalkers. So after that sleepwalker attack, the phase starts over. You now just attack her again with crush weapons until that shield drops. Then you use magic on the totems. Once the totems are fully charged, you have to deal with that sleepwalker attack again. But then when you fully charge the totems after phase 3, the fight is going to be over. She only uses the sleepwalker attack twice each fight. So that's the process for killing her, but you also need to be able to survive during the fight. Let's go over her attacks. She has some attacks that she can use on any phase. First of all, she uses all 3 attack styles. Similar to Jad, she has melee, range, and range attacks, and you have to keep switching your overhead prayers to protect from them. There is a lot of info here, but when it comes down to it, you're likely just using protect from magic, and you're switching to protect from range sometimes. You can survive this only recognizing one of the 3 attacks, but I will be breaking down all 3 in depth right now. The melee attack gives you the least time to react, so technically it's best to just always be on protect from melee and react to the other 2, but also if you're standing behind her when she uses it, it doesn't hit you at all. So the goal for teams is to just have one person tank and the rest of the team stands on the other side of her. Whoever tanks is a good question though. Who she decides to target is going to be based off of who has the highest defense. She's going to take everything into account here. Your defense level, that includes being boosted with a super combat potion or a Ceradomin brew. Your armor's defensive stats, even if you have piety on, that raises your defense by a lot. So if the tank turns off piety, sometimes she's going to turn around and attack somebody else. There's a couple of gear changes that you can make to try to make sure you're the tank during the fight. Guardian boots have solid defensive stats and still a good strength bonus. If the tank is wearing a Bandos chest plate and then everybody else that would be using Bandos instead uses a fighter torso for less defense, that's a pretty solid way to go about it too. If you're wearing Inquisitors, you already have worse defense than Bandos anyways. And also Torva actually has insane defense. If you're wearing Torva, you're likely to be the tank. But again, Torva's in a weird spot price-wise to be used here. You do not have to invest in Torva to be the tank though. Justiciar is a whole lot cheaper and that has higher defense, but you don't really have to wear full Justiciar. The tank could also wear like a Ring of Suffering instead of a Berserker Ring, which would increase their defense by a lot. The only reason you need that many different pieces of armor that are better defense than your team is if your defense level's also low and maybe like you're not using piety, which really you probably shouldn't be the tank then. Be aware that when you switch to your magic gear, you now have different defensive stats on your armor, so the tank might want to keep some melee gear on. It's also easier to dodge her during the magic phase. Since you're not attacking her with melee, you can stay away from her easier, so it's not that bad. Realistically, the best option for a team is that all 5 players have the ability to turn on their protect from melee in time for this melee attack. It is reactable, but you don't have that much time. You have to be quicker than the other 2 attacks, so let's go ahead and talk about that along with the range and the mage hit. I've shown you that melee hit a few times. It's a very quick claw swipe where she just drags her hands on the ground. Let's look at the other 2 attacks. First, the range attack. This is a very distinct motion where she snaps back and forth all creepy like, and then on the 4th snap comes out a range hit. It also has a very distinct sound to it. Let's listen. Click, clack, click, attack. That's what's happening here. So you have to have clicked on your protect from range by that 3rd click, or the 3rd tick in other words, because on the 4th one she's already attacking and it has decided how much damage it's going to do. So you do get 3 ticks to react to it, and the same can be said for the magic attack. It's not as obvious of a countdown when you're listening to it, but you do have the same amount of time on it, and the visual's a lot more different. You got red flowers and less of a snapping motion, more of an elegant spin. So now that you have 3 different attacks to look for, you can narrow it down for yourself. If you're not the tank, then you just stand on the other side and boom, you're not getting hit by melee attacks. If you are the tank, hopefully you've had some practice reacting to mage and range while you protect from melee. It's not that bad if you get used to it. So you're standing behind Nightmare, no melee hits will get you. If you have Protect from Magic on, you're safe when she uses a magic attack. All you have to do is click on your range attack anytime you hear or you see that click, clack, click attack. She has a lot of special attacks, but the majority of the time she will be using those magic and range attacks, and you're just switching between those 2. Let's go over some of those special attacks, though. First of all, we have the shadow hands, squiggly hands, scary fingers. I call them a lot of different things. They can be used on any phase, any point in the fight, really. They tend to have an inconsistent pattern to them. Like, there is a pattern. It's not 100%. Overall, the best bet is just getting used to reacting to these hands. She rears back, throws her hands into this big void in the ground, and a bunch of black circles spawn around the arena. And just a couple of ticks, each of those black circles spawn some hands that'll do a lot of damage. You also take damage if you're standing under the Nightmare during this. Very simply, you just have to walk away to a safe square in time. You do have to be pretty on it for this attack, not necessarily tick perfect, but pretty close, so be aware that you'll likely tank a lot of these hits while you're learning it, since it can happen during the whole fight. The rest of her special attacks only happen in certain phases, so they're very predictable. For each phase, there are 2 different phase-specific attacks that she will alternate, anywhere from every like 6 to 8 normal attacks. In phase 1, she can drop down into the ground, spawning back into the middle of the arena, splitting the arena into 4 quadrants. You can very quickly see which quadrant is safe here. You want to be surrounded by the green flowers. You can stand right on the green flowers and mage any of the totems from any quadrant. If you're standing in the dangerous area, you'll not only take continuous damage, but you'll also be healing the Nightmare if her shield is still up. That is not good. The other phase 1 special attack is Husks. She's going to spawn Husks on half of the team. Exactly how many players get the Husks does scale based on how many people are in the fight. Unfortunately, the worst scaling for this is teams of 2. Both players will get Husks on them if there's only 2 of you. Husks, when they're on you, you can't move, so you got to kill them as soon as possible. They only have 20 health. The skinny Husk uses magic while the big one uses range, though you still need to be protecting from the Nightmare too, so you might want to focus on that mostly. If she uses that black hole attack, the Grasping Claws, she will not spawn one under you if you are stuck on the Husks, but if she's already standing on top of you, the big void that she spawns under herself will still hit you. The most dangerous thing about Husks is that she uses them right as you guys charge the totem. Now, half of the team is going to be frozen while the Sleepwalkers spawn. Try and KO any Husks that are on you or your teammates as soon as possible, but as soon as you see the Sleepwalkers spawn, you have to target them. So phase 1, every 7 attacks or so, she uses either Husks or the flowers, and she alternates between the 2. Now the phase 2 specs. First of all, we have the prayer swap, technically called Curse. It's arguably her most annoying attack, but for that reason, I'll try to be brief on it so you don't overthink it. Your screen's gonna go pink for a second, and your overhead prayers are now gonna be shuffled for 5 attacks. They're always shuffled the same way though. They're just shifted over one to the left. So if you use Protect from Magic, you'll actually activate Protect from Range. Protect from Range is gonna activate Protect from Melee, and Melee is gonna activate Protect from Magic. It is pretty simple to just place some colored screen markers over your prayers if you are on Runelight, but once you get used to the attack, it's really not that bad. The worst part of it is just getting into a rhythm with your prayers and forgetting that they're swapped, or not realizing that they have been swapped back after 5 attacks, which also, that gives a message in the chat when it happens, and there is a unique in-game sound that isn't super easy to hear, but it has saved me a couple of times. The other phase 2 spec is Parasites, which have been brought up a couple of times. Similar to the Husks, she's going to choose half the team to inflict this on, unless you're a team of 2 where you both get the Parasite, and then in a solo, you get the Parasite every time. Your health orb is going to turn pink to show that you're infected. You have to sip a Sanfu serum or just click on the health orb. Obviously, a Relisum's bomb will work here too. You got to do that before it bursts out of your belly, which is only like 3 attacks later. No matter what, when it comes out of your belly, it's going to do a little bit of damage, but if you didn't drink the serum of the bomb, it does a lot of damage, and the Parasite's going to have more health. The Parasite's priority is to heal the Nightmare or the totems, if that's the part of the phase that you're on, so you have to kill the Parasites as soon as possible. They will heal her a lot. So during phase 2, every 7 attacks or so, you got either Parasites or the prayer swap, and she's going to alternate them. Finally, phase 3, we have the dash attack, aka the Falcon Kick. She's going to drop down into the floor, similar to that flower attack on phase 1, but this time she's now going to spawn on the edge of the room and go surging across in one direction. If you're in her way when this happens, it can do like 60 plus damage, so you got to move very quick. You're always going to have enough time to get out of the way, but sometimes she'll spawn in a bad spot and you pretty much have to be tick perfect. It is helpful to keep your health high when this could happen, that way you just survive even if you mess up. Lastly, we have the mushrooms. The spores will spawn in a unique pattern around the room, and if you stand on top of or even right next to one of those spores, it's going to pop and it's going to give you the yawns. While your character is yawning, you cannot run and you will attack slower, so it slows down your DPS. Also, if you hit the mushroom like right before they disappear, you may not get your run back before she uses her dash attack, and it's going to be tough to get away. Even if you get your run back, you got to remember to turn it back on. One more thing, the yawns are contagious. If you stand within 1 square of another player while you have the yawns, you will give it to them, so stay away from each other if you pop one of those spores. So during phase 3, every 7 attacks or so, she's going to use either spores or dash attack, and again, she's going to alternate them. And actually, one more mechanic for the Nightmare. If you die at Nightmare, you have to pay Shura, who is just outside of the Nightmare fight. You're going to pay her 60k to get your stuff back. She will have all of your stuff though, so 60k is not too bad of a price. I'd like to say that's it for the mechanics, but that was a very long section. You should know everything that you need to know for the kill now. I am going to go through an actual full kill start to finish though right now. So I'm just commentating over a kill that we have already done before. Shout out to the guys for getting some grinding with me on Nightmare Life. Also shout out to DQ. This was his very first kill ever that he managed. We have taken learners on a lot of Nightmare Life before, and he learned this one pretty quickly. So very simply, it has used only range attacks so far, and that is 90% of the fight is we're just reacting to either the range attack or the magic attack. I do use my Protect from Melee from habit, but since I am not the tank, I don't actually have to be using it. We already have the quadrant attack, which very simply I am in the quadrant to start it, so we go right back to just protecting from some overheads, which again, I'm flicking on my Protect from melee, but I'm actually in a safe spot here. And in fact, I did just tank that mage hit there. So sometimes you can still tank the hit and not be at like really low health. It's not like she hits that hard when you mess it up. So you can afford to mess up the overheads a handful of times, but the more you do that, the more damage you take over the fight, and you're not going to get very long trips at all. So now we get the husks. I don't get the husks here, but I do go over to help DQ out with his husks. She messes with me here by using the squiggly hands, and I didn't really back away in time. I was just too slow. Bumsville, but as you can see, DQ didn't get hit by the squiggly hands. He was currently in the Husk's trance, which means she did not spawn a void hand under her. We have finished up the shield, and we are already KOing the totems, which goes a lot quicker than the shield. The slow part is definitely her shield every time. It's not as easy to see what attacks she's using while you are attacking the totems, so it does help to have your game sounds on, and it does help to stay away from her so you don't get hit with the melee hit like I just did. The totems are charged, so we go to our corners to get all the sleepwalkers, and as you can see, one of them almost gets through here, but we just barely get the hit off in time. Now we repeat the last phase, except this time we have two different special attacks to be looking for, the parasites or the prayer swap. So our prayers are still normal at the moment, meaning we're just back and forth between protect from magic and protect from range, waiting for a special attack to happen. And there is the parasite attack. So you can see the parasite travel over to me, but you can also see that my pink orb, my health orb is pink. I also just straight up tanked that magic hit. I just click on the orb real quick, and it'll automatically drink the Saiyanfu serum for you. And in a few attacks, that parasite is going to come popping out of my belly for a little bit of damage, excuse me. It did the 5 damage to me. I got to go over and start swiping it because you can see those purple hits on her. Those are all parasites healing her. So they heal her for a lot of damage. You want to be as quick as possible in these parasites. So right at the end of those parasites, she did swap our prayers. You can notice that I don't notice it right away because I do tank a little bit of damage. I'm definitely paying more attention to DQ during this fight to see how he's doing. Spoiler alert, he makes it through the fight for KC1. 5 attacks later, you see in the chat it says you feel the effects of Nightmare's curse wear off, meaning that our prayers came back. Very often when your prayers come back, that is the timing for that squiggly hand attack. You really just got to be constantly reacting to the squiggly hands. We already got parasites again. I didn't get one in my belly, but next time they come out of somebody else's belly, I got to make sure to go attack them real quick. We're KOing the parasites as we already knocked the shield down, so they're attacking us right now because they have nothing to heal, and now we got to switch to magic really quick and charge up the totems. And right as we're getting ready to charge up the totems, our prayers just got swapped again. So I got to click on Protect from Melee to use Protect from Magic, which I was late on that one, but at least I already have it on this time so I can start healing my ass up. Once the totems are charged, we got to head to our corners and get ready for these sleepwalkers. This is our last set of sleepwalkers for this fight. Pretty much the same setup as the last set of sleepwalkers, and we got through all of them, no problem again. So now we do it one more time. Been really tanking a lot of hits during this one, not gonna lie. We got to put on our melee gear and get back to damaging her shield. The 2 special attacks you got to look out for here are the dash attack and the mushrooms. These squiggly hands, it's kind of like a special attack, but the special attacks, when I bring them up, I'm talking about ones that are phase specific. You always got to be ready for them squiggly hands. As you can see, DQ got slapped by him there, but I got slapped by him a couple times during this fight. There's the mushroom attack. Right now, you can see Blue and I are standing right in between 2 mushrooms, so we are safe where we're standing. And it looks like DQ had already gotten hit by the yawns, but he is doing a good job by not standing next to anybody, so he's not spreading it out. Oh, but Zach had just run over to him, and you almost got to see an example of the spread. It didn't happen. As the mushrooms have ended, you know that she's done a few attacks, so she's only got 2 or 3 more attacks before she's going to use that dash attack, which is happening right here. Swiped, and my poor guy was still walking because he had gotten hit by the mushrooms before. So I know we're pointing him out here, like, look how bad he's doing, but that was a good example for why you want to dodge the mushrooms. Honestly, for example kills, I say it during my hour of videos all the time, you don't want to just show an example of the perfect kill. You want to show like what's going wrong too, so that you can see how to recover and what to do correctly next time. So we knocked down our shield for the 3rd time. Now we just got to charge up the totems, and we don't even have to kill sleepwalkers this time. The fight will just be over. We got the mushrooms right at the end there as we're charging up the totem, but even if you got the yawns there, it didn't really matter because that's the end of the fight, and I guess, spoiler alerts, we didn't get anything for the drop. Shout out to the crew for getting some Team Nightmare in with me that night so that I could get a little bit of footage for this guide and the full example kill here. Now let's go ahead and talk about the best part of bossing, the rewards. Nightmare has some very, very rare drops, which is the main reason that they keep their current price. Most of the gear is mostly useful right here at Nightmare. Overall, this doesn't bode well for the exact price of these uniques. The demand is not likely to be rising for them, and they're rare enough that supply isn't skyrocketing, but it's definitely going up. Because the drops are so rare, narrowing this GP down per hour is kind of funky. Like, you're going to go a lot of hours where you don't make much money at all since her regular drops are very weak, and then suddenly you get some very thick splits. There are two big rolls for uniques. You roll on the orb table and the armor/weapons table. The armor and weapons table has the Inquisitor's set plus the Inquisitor's mace, and then also an uncharged Nightmare staff. You have a 1 in 120 chance of hitting this table on every kill, unless you have a very large team, which I will explain in a second. Once you have hit the table, it then rolls like 1 out of 10. 3 of those are Nightmare staff, 2 of them for each piece of Inquisitor's armor, and then 1 for the Inquisitor's mace. The orb table is its own separate roll, so you can get an orb and like an armor piece on the same kill. The orb table is 1 in 600 though, and then it's just a 1 in 3 with an even chance for every orb. Because there are 2 different rolls, you do have an effective chance of 1 in 100 for getting a unique from Nightmare, which is a nice way to round it up. 1 unique every 100 kills. It's all up to RNG, of course. Like I was saying before, it does depend on team size too. When you have more than 5 people in the fight, it adds a 1% chance to double your rolls. That's 1% chance per player over 5. So if you max out the fight at 80 people, there's only a 75% chance that it doubles your rolls for uniques. Overall, your best odds at making cash are just sticking with a good 5-man team. If you did enough hours of Nightmare to even out your RNG enough, like grinding out the pet or completing the collection log, getting a bunch of kills, I can see averaging 3 to 5 mil GP an hour pretty easily, depending on your team's DPS, and of course depending on where the prices stay at. If the prices of the drops continue to go down, that does make a huge difference. Learning how to grind Thosane's Nightmare can also be a really good way to get uniques here, but that's much more difficult of a challenge, and I will be making a separate video about that in the future. We can't forget about the other uniques though. The Nightmare does have a jar and a pet. The Jar of Dreams is kind of a weak drop, but it's still better than the average drop of like herbs or coal or something. The Nightmare pet is one of the cooler pets in the game. I got really lucky and landed this during the Shattered Relics League, but I have not gotten it in the main game yet, so I'd like to get that done if RNG pleases. I think that is about it for this Nightmare guide, everyone. This is definitely a long guide, but that's because there's a lot of information that you really could hone in your Nightmare grind with. Again, though, I am making a quick guide, which you may not really need if you made it this far in the video, but if you didn't actually watch the full guide and you're just hoping for a quick rundown, that guide should be linked in the description. It'll be coming out the day after this one. If you still have any questions about the guide, be sure to let me know in the comments section below, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. If you enjoyed this video, or you just got some useful information out of it, be sure to like and subscribe for more content. I do stream on Twitch, which should be linked on the screen and in the description. I'm also on Twitter and have a Discord, which are linked in the description. Thanks again for watching my Nightmare guide, everybody, and best of luck on your Nightmare grind.